Hi, we're Dan and Michelle with Honeymoon Always. We have been looking for an apartment in Lisbon for about 4 months now, actually. If you watched our last video, you know that we got out of our last apartment in Campo and we put all of our stuff in a storage unit, went to the United States for Christmas, came back, and have been on kind of an endless string of house sitting our friends' pets until we found the right place for us. And we finally found it. We're so excited. And today we want to tell you all about how that process went, all the negotiations, all the things you might be able to expect, and what we ended up with. So if you find this content helpful, we hope you will subscribe to our channel and follow along with us on Instagram at Honeymoon Always.
So the first question is, where do you look when you're looking for an apartment in Portugal? And there are several websites where you want to start. First, Idealista is probably the most popular, but there's also plenty of others where we've had a lot of luck. And we'll put a bunch of links in the description for you to find plenty of apartment rentals available in Portugal.
We found our apartment on Casa.sapo. The next question is, should you use a realtor? Did we use a realtor?
So when it comes to using a realtor in Portugal, it really depends. If you're trying to rent something from the US, you definitely need one. And there are realtors that will provide a service of helping you set up a lease remotely so you can get your visa. If you are here, you can do a couple of different things. You could have a buyer's agent. That is fairly new here, but most of the time your buyer's agent can make a deal with the listing agent. They can split the commission and they get paid that way. But some people require an upfront fee because there's a chance that they will find an apartment for you and they will not be able to get any commission out of it. So that is something that you need to speak to your realtor about. It is totally normal for them to charge a fee upfront now for Americans that are looking for leases here in Portugal. For us, we felt a little more comfortable doing more work on our own, but we did contact the realtor to keep an eye out for us and set up a couple appointments. It turns out that the apartment that we ended up with had a property manager who in the description of the apartment said they did not want to work with other realtors. So that worked in our favor in this situation. And she also didn't want to speak with someone that spoke English.
Not working with a realtor is what got us our current place, but we totally understand and can see why a realtor would be helpful in other circumstances.
Yeah. In both cases where we rented an apartment here, we always had someone look at the lease for us. So we had a realtor the first time that looked at the lease. This time we had some friends, Ian and Fabrizio, who looked over the contract. One of them was a realtor, and if you need help buying an apartment, we'll put their information in the description as well.
Now we want to talk about furnished versus unfurnished apartments. When we were first looking for apartments, we were definitely looking for furnished apartments, and it was just extremely competitive. I think there's a lot of people looking to move to Portugal right now. We ran into people just like us looking at all the same apartments, and our options opened wide up when we started looking at unfurnished apartments. About 90% of the listings online for available apartments are going to be unfurnished. So it may be more competitive for you if you're going to look for furnished apartments, but it also is a really good option when you're just landing in a new country, a new city.
Next, we'll talk about negotiations. So in the US, if you want an apartment, you go to the apartment complex, you get the price and the contract, and you can read it, but you usually can't negotiate too much. Here, it is very different. So once you pick your apartment, you put an offer in on that apartment and you can negotiate pretty much anything. And it really depends on the market and the owner of the apartment to decide what you can negotiate. Right now, looking for a T2 apartment that was furnished, there was no room for negotiation. You needed to line up perfectly with what they wanted because there were so many other people looking for that exact same apartment. They weren't going to budge on the price. You better hope that your timing works with theirs, and all the other stipulations that they want you to do, you're gonna have to do it. When we moved to a 3-bedroom, which was what we ended up getting, it was much less competitive and it was unfurnished. And we already spoke about the fact that the property manager didn't want to speak English. So those things made this apartment much less competitive. So we had some room for negotiation.
We also knew that the apartment had been on the market for over a month. So that was an indicator to us that we had some room for negotiation, where in other circumstances, it was made clear to us how competitive the property was.
Yeah. And this is going to vary based on time of year and how popular it is to move to Lisbon at that time. So it really depends. We negotiated on the price both times with both apartments and brought them down a little bit. This time we brought them down 100 euros, and it's kind of typical between 50 and 150 euros for them to go down. The next thing you're going to negotiate is the length of the lease. And this is where there's a cultural difference because Americans, we're used to 1-year leases, and anything more than that kind of sounds crazy. I've never done more than a 1-year lease in the United States. Here, you are allowed to break your lease early, and it is totally normal. So when I say I want to live here for a year, they say, great, that'll be a 3-year lease, because you can break your lease after a third of your lease term. So that's exactly how it went. I said, I want a 1-year lease. They're like, okay, great, 3 years, right? And I was like, no, I want a year, because you never know, what you're getting into until you've actually stayed in the apartment. So I wanted 1 year that we could get out of early if we wanted to. They did not want to budge, so we went with a 3-year lease. And it's kind of funny because before this, we've spoken to friends that had 3-year leases, and I was just like, I just can't commit to that. But at the end of the day, it's really a 1-year lease because you can break it after a third.
But so far, so good. We really love the apartment.
We've been here like 20 days and no red flags. A year should be just fine.
Yeah.
But that is one thing you're going to want to negotiate. Another thing is how much money you put down when you sign the lease. So most people are going to want 2 months of a deposit and then 1 to 2 months rent. If they want more than that, you need to negotiate that. I've heard crazy stories of people wanting a year or 6 months. Everyone I've spoken to has done 3 or 4 months upfront. That is what's typical.
Okay. Something we encountered that was kind of new to us for this specific contract was the owner had some very specific things that they wanted covered about the apartment that in other circumstances either hasn't come up or wouldn't come up in the US. So I'll try to put a video here, but we have these big open windows in the living room and the sun beats down really hard on these beautiful hardwood floors. And they put in the contract that we would be held financially responsible for any sun damage. And in the United States, that's something that would be called normal wear and tear, right? Like the owner decided what floors they wanted to put in this house, the windows are there, and we as tenants have no command over the sun, unfortunately. So it seemed really crazy to us that we would be held responsible for that. And so we started to negotiate about this, and it was so interesting because it really seemed like we could not see eye to eye about how to resolve this issue. We didn't want to be held responsible. They definitely wanted us to be held responsible. So we offered up, hey, we're going to put up curtains. We're going to put down a runner rug right there. So the hardest part of the sun is not going to reach the floors. It'll just reach this carpet, which even in the United States, if that was something that was going to be used to protect the property, that's something that the landlord would offer or pay for or whatever. But we kept having these things where he'd say, okay, if you put up curtains, I'll pay for half and I get to keep them, is what he thought. And then same with the rug. And ultimately what happened is we worked with our friends, Ian and Fabrizio, who helped us with our contract. They helped us write some language that helped kind of bridge the gap of communication. And we basically said, if we do these things, if we cover up the floor and we have curtains in the windows, we will not be held responsible for the power of the sun. And there's still a part of us, I think, that is so used to the litigiousness of the United States that it still, to me, is not tight enough language. I feel like there's still room for us to be held responsible, but we've done everything we can. We've taken photos. Once we moved in, we got the carpet and the drapes. We sent the landlord photos. And so our hope is that we're setting the groundwork for us to not be held responsible for this. So that's just something that we had to figure out how to negotiate. It was just a big difference for us from how things would go in the United States versus here.
All that to say, when it comes to your contract, you definitely need to negotiate all these little details. You can even negotiate if you want a refrigerator replaced, or we've heard several friends that didn't have a washer in the house, so they had that added. This is when you can negotiate everything, make sure you understand what you're signing, who is responsible for different repairs. Are you responsible if the appliances break down? Are they responsible? All of this is just so standard in the US, but here it's not. I think there might be a vague standard, but every contract could have nuances and differences in it that you need to understand before you sign it. So if you don't work with a realtor, you can pay a lawyer to review it, and that's something I would definitely recommend. So now we'll talk about setting up utilities. So in the first apartment we had, the landlord kept everything in their name, which was great because we didn't have to set it up. But I didn't like not knowing how much we were actually spending on gas and electric, because basically we paid a certain amount, and then at the end of the lease they kind of calculated to see how much we used, and we ended up using just a little under what we calculated, and we got that back with the deposit. So it worked out just fine, but I'd rather know how we're using things, and are we using a lot of electricity, are we using a lot of water. So this apartment, we put everything in our name. That wasn't a choice, it was just how it was gonna be. And with every apartment we toured, we asked, and they always had a name. So we're like, oh, it needs to be in your name, or we'll keep it in our name.
The other thing that you'll need to know is that thing currently set up, or are they gonna have to turn it on when you come in? So for this current apartment, the gas had been turned off between tenants, which means that it was going to take longer for us to get the gas turned on because they had to actually turn it on instead of just transferring it into our name.
Yeah. So to get them turned on, we went to what's called the Loja da Cidadão, which translates as like the citizen's store. And basically what it is one place where you can go and get like your internet taken care of, your gas taken care of, electric, or like the social security offices there. And the Portuguese are really proud of this idea that you can go to one store and take care of everything at once. In the US, we just are accustomed to online forms and online processes, or even phones that you can just kind of take care of everything at once from your home. But they're really proud of it. I've had 2 people tell me that like, oh, it's so great. You just go to one place and take care of everything.
Which there is a benefit to it. I totally get it. And I will say, as far as like the efficiency of it, it was pretty good. We just are used to doing it at home on the internet.
Yeah, we went there with our property manager, which is not necessarily typical, but she took us there and she knew how to get us in and out. It took us about 30 minutes, and she had us at one counter taking care of gas and electric, and then she'd go take the number before we were finished, get the water taken care of, so we were in and out, very efficient. And it took no time to get our electric or our water taken care of, and then the gas, I think it took 2 days for them to come. They'd inspect it and then turn it on for us.
So now let's talk about what we ended up getting. And in doing so, we want to talk about what we were looking for and whether or not we were able to get that. We were looking for a T2, which is a 2-bedroom, 2-bath. It's called a T2 online. And we've already mentioned that was super competitive. We ended up getting a T3. So it's a 3-bedroom, 2.5-bath. It's larger than we need, honestly. It's frankly larger than our old house was in Austin. But we love it. We're very happy. And price-wise, it's less expensive than some of the apartments we put offers on that were T2s. So
yeah, by going to T3s, I guess everyone wants a T2, which we understand if you're like a couple like us or have 1 kid. But for some reason, T3s are just much easier to get. So, I mean, it really didn't cost us anything extra to get a bigger apartment. And here we are.
yeah.
We were looking for a furnished apartment, which we mentioned we ended up with that unfurnished apartment. And now, 3 weeks in, it's working out great. We've got the majority of the stuff we need, and we like it. So that has worked out.
Financially, it has been a little bit of a wash. Like we mentioned that the furnished smaller apartments, when you like add up all the things we had to buy, it's kind of a bit of a wash. Like it's about the same for us to have furnished our own apartment, and the very added bonus is that the apartment's now full of stuff that we like, that we chose, that's our style, and I feel so much more at home now than we did in our last apartment, so I would do it again 10 times over.
For neighborhoods, we were looking in the Estrela area and into Alcantara.
What we gain in having moved to Estrela is we are closer to sea level, which means we are further away from the airplanes. So even though we are still in the flight path, when an airplane comes overhead, it's not nearly as loud as it was when we were in Campo de Henrique.
We also wanted outdoor space, and this is another area that we compromised, because at our old apartment, we just felt kind of like cramped in there, and we didn't have a lot of separate spaces. So we really wanted like a patio or a balcony or something that we could kind of get away and be outside. So here, we do not have that. We have these enormous sliding doors that go onto like a railing. We feel like we have this like indoor-outdoor space. If we want to, we can open up all those doors, and we have this beautiful view that kind of gives us life and makes it so we don't feel that like urge to need to get out of the apartment all the time.
Yeah.
And so that's where we compromise, and it's okay, we don't have outdoor space, but we've got these huge sliding glass doors that give us a view and kind of bring the outside in. Which, speaking of the heat of the summer, we require that the apartment has AC, and this one not only has AC, but has like central air where every room has its own control. So you don't have like the big AC boxes in the apartment, but it just looks like the AC we're used to in the US.
Yeah, it's really standard for the US, but here we've really only had the individual room AC and heating, and we put an offer on an apartment where it said it was listed that they had AC and heating, but they only had AC in the living room. And we still loved the apartment, so we put an offer on it, but our thought was like, when it's the heat of the summer and it gets too hot at night, I guess what we'll do is pull the mattress into the living room. And we thought that would be fine. That was a compromise we were willing to make, but we are very happy we found a place that has a really high energy rating as well as central AC and heating.
The climate here is so mild that we only really used the AC for maybe like 6 weeks, I think, last summer.
Yeah.
All right, so another thing we wanted was a quieter apartment. Our last apartment was kind of noisy, especially at night. You'd hear like the elevator ding outside the door, and that's really a big problem. It was mostly the door. The main door let a lot of noise in, even though like the windows were double paned and they were really good. So it was just a bit too noisy, and you just hear people cough and things like that.
Yeah, there were phantom noises all night long. It really wasn't like, the street wasn't too noisy. It wasn't coming from outside. It was really just like inner apartment noise. Plus, the airplane noise was very loud, so if you ever had the windows open, you basically can't hear each other talk. You can't hear the TV, you can't hear the cell phones. Again, this is Campo de Enrique, so it's like a very, very specific to that neighborhood.
Yeah, so here we found something that is a little bit quieter, but we've also learned that we're in Portugal, we're in a big city, and people are living closer together, so it's never gonna be quite as quiet as it was in like our house in Texas. So we're getting used to that, and it doesn't bother us. You hear a little bit more of the airplane noise as they go over our home, but once again, it's like not a big deal at all.
The other thing that I'll say is that there's construction happening almost everywhere. At one point, they used to say that like a third of Lisbon buildings were just empty, and what that means, and especially with expats like us coming in, they're renovating a lot of buildings, and it is almost impossible to find an apartment that is not near some sort of construction. I don't know that any particular neighborhood is going to be like construction noise free, so that just might be something to be aware of. A good thing to do would be to like try to sit in silence in the apartment and see if you can do the noise that you're hearing.
Yeah, and stop by more than once. Because like I came here on a Friday night just to make sure that there weren't like bars that we didn't know about that were like blaring music.
Yeah.
So just keep that in mind if you're sensitive like us. Like we want to be quiet, and it is what it is. Okay,
so now the very dazzling information of how much our apartment cost. So again, we got a T3, which is a 3-bedroom, 2.5 bath in Estrela Alcantara, and we are paying 1,700 euros a month. This was negotiated down from 1,800 euros a month, and based off of a lot of the other research that we've done, this is well in line with the market. We want to share that information because we know that it is helpful for people in trying to plan what they can expect when they try to move somewhere. But a good option for you, if you are looking to kind of gauge the price of what your type of apartment might be, we recommend looking at the apartment listing websites, and that'll give you a really good idea of how to gauge the cost of what an apartment you might be looking for would cost. So that is all about our apartment. I mentioned that in our next video, we will be showing you how we furnished our apartment. It's not even close to being like finished. There's still so many empty white walls, but I know a lot of you are looking for resources for where to get your couch and your rugs and lighting. So we will share all of that with you in our next video. And if this information is helpful, we do hope you will like this video, subscribe to our channel, and follow along with us on Instagram at HoneymoonAlways. Bye.